1915, a hoodoo priestess named Aunt Julia Brown sang a song, and her neighbors thought it was a curse. She threatened to take all the land with her when she died. So far, it seems like it's coming true. But was it a curse or just a coincidence? Or could it have been a profound warning from someone who could sense that there was trouble on the road ahead? But how could she know? And what is hoodoo anyway?
Just imagine being on a cotton field or on a plantation and being brutalized, and your spouse and children being brutalized, and the idea that a god or power or spirit can seek revenge on massa. It was the one thing that the enslaved African had that gave them power.
Hoodoo originated in West Africa and adapted under the chains of slavery, whispered on ships and plantations. It manifested in the desperate desires of the powerless, stripped from their homes, lives shattered, brought to a hell they did not understand. Hoodoo is also called root work, using the power of tree roots to conjure spells, to heal, and even to curse.
So tell me about root work.
So at the root level of what root work and hoodoo is, it's about nature. And using nature, plants, mosses to heal. And then the supernatural aspects of it do carry from an ancient West African perspective that trees carry a spirit, wood carries a spirit, the ground that it grows in carries a spirit.
Wow.
So it's more than just healing, ingestion, using the botanical nature of what these plants are, but there's that spirit power. It's definitely something out here with us. It's responding to the energy.
Honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. Greetings and salutations, one and all. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Powered by, sponsored by, promoted by, supported by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. We certainly continue to invite you
Excuse
to
me,
join
Prince,
us.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
No.
I can hear you. Okay.
Yeah, everything is fine on my end.
Can you hear him, Elder Reggie?
Yes, and I can hear you also, Sister Toni. Yes.
I don't know. It must be me because Elder Reggie sound far away.
Can
Let
you
me
Yeah,
try
perhaps.
something.
Mm-hmm.
We continue to invite you to join us by visiting us at the website scrolling at the bottom of your screen, www.voodooday.org. Again, that's www.voodooday.org. We are always grateful and appreciative of our live participating audience, wherever you may be joining us in social media at this time. I'm also grateful for my co-hosts who show up and show out consistently on weeknights at 9 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time here on a platform near you. Greetings and salutations to Green Soap, we know as Elder Reggie. Peace and blessings, beloved. How you doing?
I'm good, Divine. Wow, that was a very powerful opening. I don't know if that's a movie you're in or not, but it seemed to be very intriguing. I'm good, and just looking forward to another powerful show tonight.
It's actually a clip from a prior documentary we filmed, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, called Atlas of Cursed Places. It originally aired, I believe, on Nat Geo. Yeah, I believe Nat Geo, and then on the History Channel. And we performed out in the swamp, Man Shack, out there near, Aunt Julia Brown.
Yes.
And it was quite a time. let me tell you, we had to first walk a half a mile in about a foot and a half of mud with plastic bags, tied over our feet and our ankles, just to get to the location where we wanted to film. So we were
Hmm.
indeed in the swamp. We were out there in the peat. We
Hmm.
lost equipment out there. I had some implements that just kind of mysteriously came apart on us out there in the middle of that swamp. Yeah, it was quite something. So when the German production team came through back in April and wanted us to revisit, um, me and Joshua, of course, weren't sure we really wanted to make that maneuver, but we did, and
Hmm.
things went about peacefully.
Hmm.
Sister Toni is still having some issues with her technology. She's come and gone once or
Oh.
twice since we've been talking, so
Hmm.
I'm probably going to just move forward until she returns. I
Hmm.
want to pick up where we uh, left off yesterday in terms of hoodoo, and particularly as it's coined in Jamaica and the Caribbean, obia, and the presence of obia spread by the Akan and other ethnic groups from particularly Ghana region into the New World to be seated in not only spiritual practice and tradition, but also revolution and revolt. Jamaica is the third largest island in the Caribbean at 10,992 square kilometers, four times as large as the combined areas of all the Caribbean islands held by the British in the 18th century. Mountains dominate the interior, with the Blue Mountains in the east containing Jamaica's highest point. To the west of the mountains is the rugged terrain of the Cockpit Country, a rainforest marked by steep sided hollows that made this area inhospitable to farmers, but naturally defensive for maroon communities. And although the native Tianos spread out over much of the island in small villages supporting by an agrarian and fishing economy, the populations of the island's interior and exterior became more distinct after the Spanish first settled in 1509. Although Jamaica's climate is tropical, supporting a wealth of plants and animals, the dense forestation and mountainous interior make most of the non coastal areas difficult to cultivate, especially for a competitive plantation economy that favored large plots tended by many enslaved workers. About half of the island was arable using 17th century technology, and nearly all of Jamaica's big sugar estates were located on the coastal plains. Furthermore, Jamaica is heavily indented with bays and harbors formed in part by rivers and streams, making the coastal areas ideal for trading, but those waterways were rarely navigable more than a few miles into the interior because there was little economic benefit to overcoming these geographical restrictions. Europeans had little interest in pushing into the interior. And a similar notion may be said about the bayous and the lack of early um, growth outside of the French Quarter and the surrounding swampy bayou regions of New Orleans. Christopher Columbus claimed Jamaica for Spain after landing there in 1494 on his second voyage to the Americas. But the Spanish did not settle there until 1509 at Sevilla la Nueva. Although Sevilla was abandoned in 1524 because it was deemed unhealthy, Spanish continued to spread out over coastal Jamaica. Meanwhile, the Tianos died in large numbers from both diseases introduced by the Spanish and the horrible conditions of enslavement on Spanish plantations. And this would later have a unique effect on Jamaican maroon culture, as the Native American population had disappeared as a distinct community shortly after the Spanish conquest of the island. Small numbers of Tainos probably survived among the African dominated Maroons, but sadly, most of their post colonial history has been lost. And as a
Hmm.
result, the Spanish began importing enslaved Africans to work on their plantations. Otherwise, the Spanish did little to develop Jamaica in the first century of colonization. The island's population in 1655 was estimated at no more than 3,000, more than half of whom were enslaved. Initially, the British did not intend to take the island, but after a failed invasion of Santo Domingo, now known as Haiti, on Hispaniola, they set their sights on Jamaica.
Hmm.
Greetings, beloved. Sir William Penn and General Robert Venables landed in Jamaica in 1655. And by 1660, with help from Maroon communities that had turned against the Spanish, the British quickly captured the island. When England invaded, most of the Spanish colonists fled. Many escaped the island entirely and left the Africans they had enslaved as free men and women, while a few explicitly freed their workers and fled the island together. Still others put up a strong guerrilla resistance, and England placed Jamaica under military rule for the first 5 years of occupation until the last of the Spaniards were finally killed or forced to leave. In 1660, England established a civil government in Jamaica, and hundreds of white immigrants brought with them thousands of enslaved Africans. Over the next century, the British, via the work of those they had enslaved, developed Jamaica into the jewel and the wealthiest possession of British America. It was more thoroughly developed than any other plantation colony, and by the early 19th century, a sizable portion of the plantations produced crops besides sugar, Jamaica's main export, for absentee landowners. Although immediately after occupation, however, England firmly planted Jamaica in the triangular trade system through which the island's labor intensive sugar industry exported thousands of tons of sugar and thousands of liters of molasses and rum annually. In return, European merchants brought thousands of enslaved Africans to the island each year to meet the needs of rapidly growing plantations. So by 1832, 150 enslaved persons worked on the median-sized sugar plantation. Administratively, Governor Thomas Moydford divided Jamaica into 7 civil parishes in 1664. So by 1675, a series of acts added 8 more parishes in the areas expanding rapidly under British rule. And from that point, the number of parishes varied over time. They functioned to provide low-level civil authority under the House of Assembly of Jamaica. And in 1758, the colonial government divided the parishes into 3 counties to facilitate a court system along the lines of the British county court system. Cornwall in the west, Surrey in the east, and Middlesex in the center. Thus, the British minority of the island's inhabitants had created a court system that mirrored that of the English motherland in order to exercise British laws address governance among themselves, and give themselves absolute legal authority over those they had enslaved. And as we discussed on last night, we saw these maneuvers, these policies, these behaviors then affect certainly the surrounding uh, Central American regions, but certainly here in Louisiana and in the so-called America or north of the American border, in terms of the growing fear and apprehension about us exercising any sense of freedom, liberty, mobility, holding on to any traditions, ancestral worship and acknowledgement, and then certainly as the Black codes became instituted shortly following the Haitian uprising and the Haitian Revolution, our ability to gather together in places, to organize together in places, would certainly have been greatly curtailed because of these historic events taking place, not only in Haiti, but certainly in the wealthiest British colony we know as Jamaica. Greetings and salutations to you and yours, Joshua, Wild Man, and First Priest. Welcome to the platform. We certainly appreciate you coming in and joining us. Sister Toni Val is coming and going. She's having some kind of technical issue. So we still don't have her in here with any great deal of clarity. Elder Reggie, is there anything you wanted to say or interject?
Yeah,
Joshua, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go
One
ahead.
thing I was gonna say right quick as I was listening, and I'm just looking at, I'm taking New Orleans in particular. Of course, the French and the Spanish both had turns at leadership in the city. It's when the British came in after 1803, after the purchase of Louisiana through the Louisiana Purchase, where New Orleans started taking on a different nuance, more Protestant, more rigid, because the British laws. Not saying that the French or Spanish was better, but the British were just a little bit more brutal, I believe. And I see that in Jamaica also, just from the teachings you brought forward so far, Divine.
Yes, indeed. Greetings, Joshua.
I would have to agree. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yes. I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Greetings to everyone. I'm just trying to make sure I can be heard because my phone's kind of acting up. But the the British was very crude when it came down to their methods of colonization, especially from of course in Jamaica, but also in the northeast, Nova Scotia, what was called at that time New France. That's how a lot of the Cajuns and the Cajuns kind of, and the Arcadians ended up coming down from that portion. With New France, a lot of French rulers went over to Nova Scotia, and there was intermingling with the Indian tribes there. And the British came there, and they saw that was what was going on, and they didn't like it at all. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they killed somewhere around 50% of the population up there, and the rest of them ended up down in Bayou, down here, and they're still here. Definitely, it echoed throughout from the Caribbean up north, even that far north. The presence of that British colonization.
Come on in, Sister Toni. Are you with us?
Yes, I had technical difficulties. Good evening, everyone. I missed the whole beginning portion of the show, but I am here.
Yes.
I just got in. I don't know what was wrong. I had to do several reboots to my phone. But anyway, how's everyone? I want to tell everyone hello out there. Glad you could join us. Since I missed it, I really don't know what the topic is right now.
Well, we Well, we were kind of branching from the, as Joshua just so eloquently kind of described, from the Spanish, French, Creole, Haitian Creole experience to the British influence on the so-called New World at the time, of what was going on in Jamaica, and then how that subsequently affected how we were treated in the actions that were happening here, particularly in Louisiana for us on this panel, and then certainly for the Deep South in general. I want to go on just quickly and say the vast majority of Jamaican's inhabitants from the time that Europeans first arrived were Africans who, from the 17th through the 19th century, were mostly enslaved and forced to come directly from Africa. Based on merchant ship records, those Africans mostly came from, and this will be of great importance to Elder Reggie, most of those Africans came from the Akan people in what is present-day Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast, especially the Ashantis, the Fantis, of which I'm related to by way of my mother, the Akims, A-K-Y-E-M-S, Akims, the Akwamas, A-K-W-A-M-U-S, Akwamas, and the Banos, followed by the Igbo, the Yoruba, the Congo, the Fan, and the Ibibio people, who we often directly link to authentic voodoo demonstration. So by 1700, there were roughly 7,000 British inhabitants and 40,000 enslaved Africans in Jamaica. By 1800, there were 21,000 English and 300,000 enslaved Africans. Yet, for much of the century, high mortality rates on the plantations and planters, quote unquote, buy rather than breed programs meant that Jamaican planters often bought as many enslaved persons as they could afford. And thus the growing majority of the enslaved populations remained African or had Jamaican roots no more than 1 or 2 generations old. Consequently, there was an increasingly high retention of African culture and practice. So when you take the beginning of the conversation, when I was describing the mountainous region as opposed to the unfarmable regions with those sloping sheer territories, which created that natural barrier for maroons to sort of exist in, you had 2 really distinct cultures and societies growing and developing alongside each other. One we attribute to the dominant, oppressive population, and then the other we attribute to the African, Pan-African maroon presence that was able to develop and exist there because of the regional distinctions. And so there's definitely some correlation there, Elder Reggie, with swamp and the bayous here in Louisiana, which, you know, for generations were feared by the white man as uninhabitable, at the least, and contained something monstrous, you know, at the more extreme end of the deal. And certainly when we escaped to the swamps, they thought we was crazy. You know, them niggas ran off in the water, you know, there'll be alligator food, you know, in no time. Not understanding that we had learned to navigate those so-called inhabitable regions under the guidance often of the indigenous people.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree. I've been doing some research on hoodoo, and it's been enlightened me on a lot of that, especially, and I mean, it's numbered in the hundreds, in the Southeast specifically, like how many different tribes, indigenous tribes that was here during that time, and that eventually disbanded and became different confederacies throughout time, but it was we had the assistance was there.
Right, Devon, you definitely raised a good point, because in Ghana, the two slave castles, they call them slave dungeons or castles, that I usually visit when I have the pleasure to go there. I go there, I pour libations. But what the British did, they set up these slave, they look like jails to me. But anyway, they would not go in the interior to actually capture what they call war criminals of that nature. They would send the Africans interior of Africa through the hills, swamps, or what have you, to go capture other Africans. And once they brought them back to the coastline is where the British got involved. So the British seem to be apprehensive if there's natural barriers involved. They rather send locals or people who know the land also to go do their dirty work. And I think you explained that pretty well just now.
And they were scared of all them different animals they had out there too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they bought a lot of slaves from other African tribes that went to war and had prisoners of war.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's why we say all kinfolks ain't skin folks.
That's true. That's true.
Because I mean, to sell your own people.
Tell them again, Toni.
To sell your own people to unknown people, because you had to imagine when they saw a white man, how that looked to them. He looked like a ghost, something they never seen before.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So I mean,
go ahead.
And since no one really came back to tell them, I guess, what was happening, and who knows, the slave catchers might have lied to them and say, oh, we bringing them over there and they gonna get this, that, and the other thing, and they not thinking that the people going to be enslaved.
Right. But the thing sometimes I like to look at, we know the King James version of the Bible, 1611. Right in the middle of 1611, the British was doing this slave triangle. So how, if you're doing this as a king, sanction it, you can also sanction a Bible that's supposed to lead the people to the promised land. It's kind of a major contradiction when you think about it.
Okay, you got to remember, during the time of the King James Version of the Bible, the King James Version of the Bible was written to justify slavery. Now, you got to remember, during those times, a lot of white people didn't know how to read, didn't have books. Books weren't mass produced. They didn't know what was in it. They hadn't started that. And the books was for the aristocrats and the kings and queens and stuff like that.
And Val, hold on. Let's not neglect that the Arabs had already well established an African slave trade also leading up to this time. Go ahead, Sister.
So for the American slave trade, the British slave trade, they wrote the Bible, rewrote the Bible to make it fit so that the commoners, the kings and queens, would not stop them, because they could say, look, it's in the Bible. God wants them. God tells us they are slaves. They're cursed people. They always have to get the opinion of the people on their side, or it won't work. And they do that through propaganda. King James Version of the Bible is propaganda to justify the European slave trade.
Mm-hmm. You just answered the conundrum I was having, because both things was going on at the same time, where you take the Spanish and the French, who was coming from Catholicism, with Latin being the dominant language of the religion, and some of their codes was a little more, I think, relaxed. But to me, the Spanish did a lot of damage to what we call first people, the Native Americans who was here, and they don't get called to the carpet on that a lot. A lot of it still get tagged to the British, but the Spaniards was not friendly, and it was very brutal. Also, we call them the conquistadors. Now,
especially in Florida, yeah.
Yes.
And Mexico also with the Aztecs. But remember, when the conquistadors came, they came with priests and monks. They came with that Bible also.
Yeah.
No, Tony. The Spaniards, they was coming more or less from Rome, the Pope. I don't know if the Pope was using the Bible. I don't know what they used, but the 1611 King James.
It was coming in the name of Jesus Christ to enslave and kill off the infidels. That's what it was coming to do. It's in the
they were sending the monks, the Catholics, the priests,
the Portuguese, the Spanish, Portugal, Spain, same.
They was being financed by the Roman Catholic Church.
Yes.
With creeds to enslave people that were infidels that didn't believe in what they believed in the name of Jesus Christ.
Brother Joshua, you're right, because the Pope put out what's called the Papal Bull. This was before the 1611 version of the Bible came out. So they was coming from Rome and Catholicism, calling themselves into slavery, being a little bit more relaxed, but they done so much damage to the first people on this land, the Native Americans. I'm trying to, just touch upon that also before the British got here.
A lot of those people are us too. We've been mixed up in terms of that. Like the black codes was something just to strip away our nationality, everybody's nationality, really. Yeah. Whether you was coming from India, whether you was coming from Africa, somewhere in Africa on the West Coast, or if you was already here enough color, you were being labeled, or coming from England or Europe and being a Moor, you was being black. And we still seem to be that way right now, some of us, but
yeah, Josh, you're hitting on a good point, and I was just doing the juxtaposition between the Pope and his edicts versus when King James and the British came in. They both came in. Both of them brought in terror. Don't get me wrong, but they just had a difference on who they attacked in their terror. Yeah.
Well, the Spanish attacked who they found here, and who they found here basically was the natives here.
Yes.
The people that were already here, and they went after them. It was a land grab. Who gonna be the first to discover the new world? And the Catholics, they have a different Bible. Then there's a Catholic Bible is different from the King James version of the Bible.
Okay,
they kept in a lot more stuff than King James did. It's a Catholic Bible. Yeah. So they kept in a lot more stuff than the King James version, because remember I said the King James version was written to justify slavery. The Catholics was more than slavery. They was trying to do a land grab and just kill up the inhabitants and take the land and plant their flag.
Yes. But Sister Toni, we're gonna dive more deep into magic, to religion, and all the different things that has been explored in the past. But we'll close out now with the New Orleans International Voodoo Day. Our tentative date for 2026 haven't been official yet, but once it comes, we will be putting it out. But I like to just read on the mission statement once again. The spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that bind the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. And within that social division, we are unpacking religion. We are unpacking magic. We are unpacking all the different forces that reigned upon the people of color as a collective, not just the Africans, the Native Americans, the Chinese. Everyone had got their chance to be stifled upon. And we'll continue to unpack that. We give thanks to our host, Divine. We give thanks to Mr. Toni. We give thanks to Brother Joshua. And we also give thanks to our collective audience that always shows up in the chat and support what we are doing. We are very thankful for you guys, and we appreciate you. With that, I say, oh. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. See you tomorrow night.
Yes.
Oh, sure.
That's it.
Please, allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this white in my DNA, yeah, I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the table, strip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees, it's time you pay for your dirt and your showtime. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Meet you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Red. He looks me in my eye and says, "You only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside." I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down.